So I'm gonna, there, okay. So I want to put this link in the chat in case you're interested for the, it's on broadcast on CTN. So you can copy that if you're interested in following up with the unarmed police response. I'll introduce a couple of topics that really do overlap, but you know, in our world, almost everything overlaps with everything else. So it makes it interesting, but also a little confusing. The unarmed Ann Arbor is discussing an unarmed police response. And they've had, the city council has unanimously asked the acting city administrator to develop a plan. We've published some information about that in our newsletter. And if you need that, I can send you that newsletter on or give you the links. The city administrator has given quite an interesting and complete response saying, really, in order to plan for this, we need more direction from the city council. That is a very smart way to go about it because you know politics involves people, and people are invariably complex and confusing. And he's the second acting administrator that Ann Arbor has had in the last year. So you know he's not in a position to really he's just acting. So it really makes sense that he asks the city for direction. That's all to say that the city has a lot of, they're really embarking on a lot of new projects, and the mental health is one of them. And there is a group. This is the city of Ann Arbor, which is, you know, the largest city in Washtenaw County, but NAMI is a Washtenaw County organization. So we try to take a larger view than just the city of Ann Arbor. But so there's a very interesting set of proposals. We support unarmed police response totally, but we really feel it's going to the NAMI board for its approval. But there's a group called Citizens for Public Safety, Mental Health and Public Safety, which I'm involved with, and we're developing really pressuring the city to incorporate their unarmed police response with 988, with the county 911 program and the community mental health, because there's some sense that some people want this to be a completely independent and siloed response for unarmed police response. And our general feeling is that we have enough silos already. We need to have collaboration among people who are really working in good faith. So that's a little bit of background on that. If you want more information, I'll be happy to send it to you. So that's a local initiative. The second initiative we're working on was referred to by a couple of people with the 988 response, crisis response system, which is due to come into action to begin in June of 2022 this year. It is a very large component, and it's going to take a lot of planning, and statewide and locally. So we are really focusing on that as a major change in how people respond to crises. How communities respond to crises. So the notion that crises should be responded to by mental health people rather than by emergency staff like EMTs, fire departments, and police. It's not an either-or thing, but there's such a large component of mental health functioning in crises that 988 really provides a way of dealing with mental health crises in ways that we haven't seen before. So this is really encouraging, but very complicated. So that's the second initiative we're working on, as you know. The third initiative that comes, is related, and I sent you all examples of this. The Department of there is increased interest in parity enforcement by the U.S. Department of Labor and Health and Human Services and Treasury and mental health about parity, mental health parity and Addiction Equity Act, the otherwise known as the Wellstone and Domenici bill that was passed in, I think, in 2008. So parity, simple language, parity has to do with access. And it requires, the Wellstone-Domenici Act requires private insurer policies, health policies, to provide this, and public as well, provide the same level of care for mental health services as physical health services. So specifically, you cannot, it is actually against federal law for a insurance policy or program to limit the number of access in any way to mental health services that are not limited in the same way to physical health services. So, if you have a deductible for physical health, it should be the same deductible. If you have limits of coverage for physical health, you can have similar limits of coverage for mental health, but no less. I mean, a lot of policies have limited mental health coverage to certain co-pays that have been different than physical health, restrictions on amount of service that can be provided, and the like. So the parity legislation, just at the same time we have the 988 program, we have now the Department of Labor, it appears to be taking a stronger interest in enforcing parity. Up to this point, parity has been enforced by state insurance commissions because that's the logical group to enforce all kinds of rules about insurance. But now it looks like the federal government is becoming more active in that. And I sent you a report of that. That's very important because we really think that any assistance that the 988 system will work as long as it has, if there's access to services, and they can provide some access to services, but really you have to engage the private insurance and Medicaid services as well, the payers, the mental health payers in access, and otherwise it's going to fall to general funds, which are always limited. And so we really need to have a joint operation with the health insurance policy. So these are real kind of systematic changes in 2022. And I can't help but think that our experience with COVID has really upped the stakes. I know that's a very simple explanation, but that's kind of apparent what it appears to me. Did anyone have a chance to look at these documents I sent? I realize I sent them out at the last minute, so. Michelle, I saw you nodding your head.
Yeah, I was very interested in the report, and it seemed to acknowledge the fact that there was a disparity in care. So the fact that they found that out feels like someone will do something about it now.
Yeah. I mean, this is part of our advocacy for 988. Really has to also engage the private insurers in some degree, because they can provide reimbursement for these services. Community mental health already has a contract with Blue Cross Blue Shield to provide case management services for their Medicaid expansion clients and patients. And so I think these private-public partnerships are going to become very interesting and productive. So there's a third thing I want to tell you about, and I know this may just spoil any kind of conversation, but I'd really love to get because when you complexify things too much, it tends to overwhelm people. But one of the biggest problems in the 988 system is the lack of a workforce to provide services. I don't know if you're, Summer, if you're having experience with this. NAMI is having experience with this. We're really having difficulty finding people to provide to be for staff positions. Do you have you had experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't had any positions open for a little while, but I do know, excuse me, that CMH is in a terrible position right now, and I know that other clubhouses around the state have
Yeah,
also had challenges in finding people. And I will say that when we were hiring earlier last year, it did take us a lot longer to find someone we got far fewer resumes. Like a fraction of the resumes we usually get. So it
yeah.
was a lot
We're
harder.
actually we're actually thinking of going to retired people that we know to do contract work and
Yeah.
say, will you work on this project for this amount of money because we can't find, and would you mind coming out of retirement or uh, because because of that problem. And I know CMH is down quite a few positions, but it's the same with the schools. Yeah. They've Ann Arbor Public Schools have enlisted bus drivers and cafeteria workers and the rest to for substitute teachers. And if they can't do that, then they have to send people home. They have to send kids home if they can't. If they can't, so and my son's teaches in New Jersey, and he says in some high schools they're doubling up classes, putting in auditoriums, and that's how they're solving a problem. So teaching is also under stress. And then the third group is police. I was on a call with Kalamazoo sheriff, who said he's down 20 positions. And these sheriff's departments the positions, they're about 150 people. 20, down 20 positions is really a lot. And then they are actually encouraging some of their maintenance and staff to actually get training get quick training as officers to fill shifts. So
As police officers?
exactly,
That
exactly.
seems
Well,
like
I mean,
even
you
a
should.
worse idea than bus drivers in classrooms, and that's a really bad idea.
It is. I
Whew,
know
okay.
it's upsetting. Um, but everyone is desperate. The point is, everyone is desperate, and we're all at a kind of bit of a loss to explain the workforce shortage. Group homes are having to close. In Oakland and Macomb County, we know of group homes which have closed because they can't staff it. So okay, so the context is here comes 988 saying we're going to provide emergency crisis response and help you find connections with referrals to a system that's already under stress. And so NAMI in its budget for and this is a thing that I want to kind of get your feedback on. NAMI is interested in doing a pilot project for first responders um, to provide education and support to either help make people make decisions or to provide support. That's a very difficult thing to do because um, we don't want to provide the functions of a HR, human relations, activity, but we do think that like it's like analogous to family, we provide support for family members whose loved ones and education for family members whose loved ones have mental health conditions. And in order to maintain relationships and to continue their good work, it's not much of a stretch to also consider this for for responders. We're not sure how to do this, and I'm just interested in throwing that out to you as a as one of the things that we're talking about for our expanded contract with CMH, because we have some experience with family to family and peer to peer in both support and education. So what do you think?
I'm sitting here looking at Ashley on the screen thinking, you're just starting out your career and now they're calling all of us old timers back. I know a friend who's 72. She retired from U of M, I think 4 years ago, on a pulmonary unit. They've asked her to come back. They said, well, you come back and take a position, or can you give us a number of hours? So, speaking as a retired person, I don't know that I would want to go back full time, but I certainly would be willing to, fill in some shifts and some hours. And so that might be an interesting opportunity for some people.
Yeah. I think we need to provide, what I'm interested in is what can NAMI do to support that activity, either people coming back or people who are in the systems that are struggling. Because that's what we do, education support. Believe me, I don't really have much of a outline beyond that, except to ask some of our retired people to participate in it, because police officers like to talk to police officers, social workers like to talk to social workers, teachers like to talk to teachers. Nobody, everyone is unique and in their professional field. So I don't know. That's Ashley, what do you think? What's your reaction to all this? As a
Yeah,
you're like exhibit A, under the slide of the microscope. So.
that's okay.
The
That's
ops
fine.
costs look good.
Thank you. I've just been kind of like in the background in idea mode ever since we transitioned the conversation from the Parity Act, because I did a project in school on that act and I'm really interested in that too. And we talked about the gaps and stuff. But when it comes to first responders and potentially having folks who are peers responding and trained, isn't there a model in some state for that? I think it's usually the peers paired with like another care responder and goes in, but I wonder if we can look to any like systems that are in place already. Like I need to look at Cahoots or the other systems to see if those have any peer folks within them already. But
that's a
that's
great
where
point.
I would start is anyone already doing this? That's kind of what I would ask first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people doing it. Community health workers are very popular in underserved communities, especially overseas. But there's a strong contingent of community health workers who are essentially peers, trained peers. Michigan itself has a peer specialist program, and we all know a number of those people. Some have come through Fresh Start. And there's a group called Intentional Peer Support, IPS, which has done a lot of training, so that they are around. And there's been quite a history of research to indicate that peers are very effective. And really, one of the things we need to think about is changing scope of service to allow and to actually change our perception of what peers can do among agencies, because they can do quite a bit more. There are some trade-offs that you engage. Summer, you have a peer model, right?
Well, sort of. So there was a time when we had peer supports at Clubhouse, but wasn't designed well, so it didn't work super well at Fresh Start. Right now, all of our, and for a long time, all of our staff have been professional staff. Not to say that they don't, also potentially have a mental illness, but they're not trained as peer supports. But to Ashley's point, that yes, certainly. In the legislation that we wrote to support this, it was very much with the idea that peer supports would be involved in that response. And I do know also that we've had some very initial conversations with CMH, not about like 988 or this specifically, but just sort of the staffing shortage in general, about how can we engage more peer mentors and folks like that who have received services and might be able to, like you said, not necessarily provide the full array of services, but are there pieces of it that folks can take on to help out this challenge?
Yeah, if you have caseloads of 50, which is quite large, and I don't know what caseloads are now at CMH, but you can manage them if you have peer support people
Right.
doing some of the functions.
Exactly.
Especially transportation and linkages, warm handoffs with other agencies and advocacy and things like that. So, what did you find the problems? What do you mind talking about the problems that you understand in terms of peers, not just your own agency, but your general observations? I don't want to put you on the spot, but
Yeah. I mean, our situation was sort of a specific, like it wasn't clear what was supposed to happen. I think what I've seen, I think it just depends a lot on how we're using peers, like what their role is and how well they understand their role, and how well they are integrated into the rest of whatever team they're working on, and how much that team takes them seriously. I think those are some important factors.
yeah,
I mean, there's always the issues of, this could be true for anyone though, not necessarily just peers, but just of people, if they're coming from the same system that they're working in, that then there are issues there potentially, or the potential for issues, whether that's like boundary situations or them ultimately needing supports on their own. But like I said, that could potentially happen to anyone,
yes,
even if they're not in the peer role. I think to me it's more like, what are we being clear about what the role of this person is, and what their expertise is, and are they being taken seriously, and paid appropriately for the work that they're doing.
yes. One of the I did read a book by the intentional peer support people just recently, about and how the important it is to make the distinction between a clinical approach, which has to do with assessment, identification of problems, and problem solving, and a peer approach, which is not a problem solving approach, but is a relationship approach. And you want to maintain a relationship, and how you want to avoid assessing situations for problems.
In that sense, Clubhouse is very peer support approach, even though we don't use peer support specialists per se.
Yeah. So I mean, and in that respect, there's I don't want to, there's a kind of systemic difference in the logic of the two systems. Because I as a social worker, I was trained to identify and to to problematize, and that you really have to rein that in, and think of peers as being entirely based on a very different. That doesn't mean they can't collaborate and cooperate, but I'm interested, Rochelle, in have you had experience with community health workers in nursing?
To a very limited basis, obviously physical health as opposed to the mental health side, and in like community clinics, and they've worked out very well because they are chosen because they are of that neighborhood, or, you know, they can connect with the people that they're working with. So
Yeah.
they've worked out very well.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I think now rather than being a good alternative, it may become a really necessary alternative
Yeah.
because of the workforce shortage.
Mhm.
Carolyn, you were a teacher. You know, and teachers often use parents in classrooms, or student, paraprofessionals, they call them sometimes.
Right. And I had a lot of student teachers also, well over 70. So I've worked with volunteers, and I think that I was listening very closely to what Summer said, and I can see, I just kept nodding my head as she was speaking, because I think it's very important in this situation that the people who are the peer support group understand their role very carefully and accept it. Because I think in my situation, helping a child with reading would be very different than help in the mental health situation. I think that I go to the hospitals and I hear about the peer-to-peer and how it's being received and working. And I think that this can be an extension of that. But again, the rules and the people need to be very clear in their role. But I think I'm a support group person, so I think anything with peers is good.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think we're still working on this new relationship with our new contract with the county, but I think I'm going to be bringing back some of that and working with anyone who was interested in trying to develop a model. And because you don't want to be, I know there's things to avoid. You don't want to be appearing like you're solving problems you can't solve. Support is not a problem solving system. It is providing assistance to people, and your real benefit is to help those people work through their issues through the kind of shared knowledge of the group. It's not you're not there to do a therapeutic intervention or help people solve their problems. You leave that up to them. And so that's support groups and education groups. I think we've all been, people who are actually service providers have been educated to a fairly well. We're sort of, I don't know how you all respond to an offer to provide more education, but I'm sort of skeptical. You're gonna, I'd rather read things and listen to things and come to my own conclusions than sit with a bunch of people and go through another quasi classroom experience. I think the adult education is really not, you can't model it on a classroom situation. So I'm thinking part of the education could be through videos and podcasts and discussion groups rather than having a curriculum. And I'm interested in your reactions to that. You're the most recent of us to be educated formally, Ashley. Are you tired of it?
I'm all for variety of learning styles and learning.
Oh, nicely said.
avenues.
You are a true diplomat.
I mean, I think different things work for different people.
Yeah.
I'm a audiovisual learner,
Mhm.
so I appreciate my classes where there's a lot of pictures and images and
Hmm.
concepts are explained that way.
Hmm.
And I also have recently like to read like transcript as my teacher is speaking, because that just helps me process things. So yeah, I do think podcast videos, I do think the active learning movement is here. Like, we are no longer in a sit here for 2 hours of lecture, no breaks, staring at a screen or staring at the front of the classroom. Like, that just isn't very conducive to anybody's learning. So I think variety is good, but that's me.
Yeah, that's great. And you have to allow people some choice in choosing their preferred way, and so it makes it a little harder.
Yeah, it just, and maybe that's something we could, like, do an assessment for at the beginning. Like, what are the needs? What are people's accessibility needs?
Mm.
And then based off of what you get from the community, then start developing
Hmm.
some things based on that.
For both
Mark,
education and support.
Mark, in
Yeah.
sort of a general sense, how are peer-to-peer folks chosen? Is it a professional's assessment that you are doing well, and so you might want to be a peer? Or do people say, I'd like to be a peer? I mean, how does it work?
Hmm.
They apply?
Well, I think it's all of that. As we go through classes, we identify people who seem to have some capacity or knowledge, skill, or predilection. So you say, are you interested in learning and doing more? And there's a training, a formal training process for peer-to-peer and education programs where you go through all the materials, and in a kind of active learning situation, more, it is a curriculum-based, it is a notebook-based presentation, but the real meaning is you get the interaction of the group in the education programs. The support programs are really different. They aren't manually based. They are, different people can show up at different times, and they so some of these groups tend to be focused on the population of people. Like the mental health court had its own peer-to-peer program, and we had a peer-to-peer program in the jail. So it was useful to have people who at least some lived experience by people who had experience as prisoners, and could speak to that. And also in the courts, in the mental health court, it was not quite that as much as having access during the hearings really gave people contact with the peer-to-peer people, so that they saw them not just as a program service provider, but as someone who was at the hearings. Now that's all gone a bit awry because the court hearings are all remote. So,
So can you explain a little bit more about, so the purpose of the mental health court peer-to-peer was to just be support through the hearings? Is that?
yeah, no, it's for people, it's voluntary, so people can choose to do it or not. So it's not mandatory. That's the first thing. The second thing is it's an 8-week program, which is an education-based program, and it's manualized. So you go through a certain amount of material, stigma, mental health diagnoses, things like that. But the real benefit, from all that I've seen, really comes of developing relationships among the people. And so no one really gives advice, but people say, well, you share your experience. It's a matter of shared group wisdom. So I said, now I'm not telling you what to do, but this is what happened to me, and take it or leave it. This is how it worked for me. So it's education within a supportive environment. So does that answer your question, Ashley, about how people get there?
Yes, voluntarily and 8 weeks of education. So now that things are virtual, it's harder to have
Yes,
like make the connection
yes.
from
It's
your
it's an entirely different proposition that actually makes it for some people it makes it easier. For some people it makes it more difficult. It's not some in some respects we have people in peer-to-peer. Now there are peer-to-peer programs not associated with mental health court or the jail or the justice system. There are peer-to-peer programs at Chelsea Community Hall, the Chelsea Hospital, and the rest. But they're all voluntary and they're all online. And there is also a self-selection process. So if you're not required, you're not paying anything. So if you don't decide to come, if it's not for you, you just don't show up. But the virtual aspect of it has had, I suppose you can say it has pluses and minuses. It's easier for people to do. People can, we have some people in Ohio who come to peer to peer. And, so it's the transportation and logistics are much easier. And in some respects, it's easier for some people to navigate a screen than it is to navigate a group, to be in person. So, but some people it's more difficult. So, yeah, yeah. So I'm not sure we can do it actually follow some of the same models that we do with service providers, because really what we're interested in is, supporting, either promoting, developing peers, doing a peer development program where we can work with CMH to expand their use of peers or to recruit more peers, or we could also support existing staff. And we could also encourage people who are retired to re-enter the workforce through a peer support system, an education system. And that would be very different than peer-to-peer for mental health, people with mental health conditions. Because you might have, if it's a community mental health, you might say, well, you would have Lisa Gantz and Trish Cortez come and talk about what it's like to work for mental health, or have some workers come and say, this is what we do now. And, here's what could you do? And, maybe that we could be just an interactive venue, not, education of a different way. It's not education around a set of topics, but education around a system, and maybe people who are peers and who are retired people, they're seeking to get them to return, they'd be willing to do that. I haven't, this is all, you got to appreciate it. It's not the same thing. It's not, but I feel just like if we don't address this, we're ignoring a major component of our environment. I mean, if we don't think about this, we're sort of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's like, yeah, you're right, I don't know what the answer is. One specifically on the peer side, one of the things, or maybe two of the things that make that difficult are that the folks at the state who do peer support training are like pretty like holding on to that pretty tight. So it's not really at this point in time. I think it would. Oops, sorry, Kat. If she hangs up on you, I apologize. But she's definitely hit the exit button before. Anyways, so that would be a tricky thing. And then the other part of it is that I don't know that this is necessarily the case in other states, but at least in Michigan, there's this like weird kind of circular situation where you have to have experience to go to training, but you can't get hired until you have experience. It's like a weird, like it's, I don't know, it's sort of a circular, like you need to have experience to get training, but you need to have training to get experience. And a lot of people find it very difficult, to make their way
What
through
we
that
hear,
system.
what we hear from other places like the schools and police is they're seeking exceptions.
Yeah.
They're saying, look, that's all well and good when we have all our positions filled, but we really have to we have to have an expedited process, and that
Yeah, and I think that speaks to like what you were talking about, like with looking at like scope of service and things like that. Like what do we really need to, people to
yeah, I
be
mean,
able to do, or what experience do we really need people to have?
and I think what NAMI can do is to say, look, we're really interested in the people and in providing support for the people who are thinking about this, or who are struggling with it. I don't want to get involved in teaching peer specialists for CMH, but NAMI would really be good at developing support groups for people who are returning or getting that peer specialization to really help them work through their own decisions. Like, do I want to do this? And I think we would take the point of view was it's up to you. I'm not here to convince you to do this, something that they want you to do, but here's how other people respond. And so our focus would be on the people themselves rather than the system. Because we'll get nowhere if all we do is act as an adjunct to the system. That's not what we do, really. So, but I think we can support the system and get people to make up those decisions quickly. I mean, you really want people to make up their minds in knowledgeable ways and do it quickly and expeditiously. And if they have to graciously, remove themselves because it's not right for them, do you want them? I mean, it is the advantage of the system to do that. If it's not fit, if it's not a good fit, don't waste everyone's time. So in a sense, it would serve the larger system by getting people. That's one way of looking at it, at least. So, well, this is really helpful. I mean, I'm really, Ashley, I think we need to talk about parity, because if you've written a paper on parity, you've written one more paper than I have. So I want to know about it. And I think I'd like to bring back some of these things to you because you are a really diverse group, nursing, administration, beginning social worker, and, experienced teacher. We really have an interesting combination of skills. But I really, seems to me that we're not advocating for some kind of adaptation to this workforce issue. It's like we're chasing our tail. It's a dog chasing its tail. Okay, good. I see some nodding, so that really helps me. That's clear. Great. Well, we're at 6 o'clock. So anything else that you all want to? Yeah, Rochelle.
Mike, I have a quick question. The very first thing you talked about was the unarmed police response and city council.
Yeah.
Would we be wise to contact our city council people?
Yeah.
And ahead of time and advocate for their support?
Hell yes. And
Okay.
I will distribute the information. We have the Citizens for Mental Health and Public Safety that's, which is 4 people, let's face it, it's me, Glenn Nelson, Carolyn knows Glenn, Barbara Higman, who's our longtime person, and Marilyn Wadenoya, who was retired from school social work at Eastern. So we're a pretty cool group, and we're going to be defining how, if we expand our group. We were just a rump group, and we are addressing Ann Arbor City issues, largely because of their orientation. That, the city got about a lot of money from the millage as a rebate because they already have their own police agency, and the public safety and mental health millage rebated money to city governments who already had their own police forces. So that has to do with the public safety part of that millage. So they were wanting to spend it on some things that weren't related to mental health and public safety, which we were trying to get them to say, no, don't do that. Don't spend it on the Argo Dam. Fix the Argo Dam with your own money. Use this stuff. So I will report back, and I'll send you all, especially you, Rochelle. Are you all interested in the information on the public safety stuff, the unarmed police response? I'll send you that.
Good.
Great.
Because it
It's
just so
great.
happens that you and I are both in Ward 4. So, we can contact Elizabeth Nelson and Jen Iyer, but
Yeah.
that's one council person.
Yeah, and now, I'll tell you, Ann Arbor City is so different than the county. There was a vote to investigate having a public electrical utility for the city. I can't tell you how there's some, it makes me a little concerned. I think a lot of people concerned that they're branching off into all these areas that, and we're going to leave the rest of us, behind and so we're pushing mental health and relationship with mental health and public safety. So that's our remit, our watch. Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot, everybody. I'll send you the stuff on the city and drop into, and we can continue to talk about those initiatives. Thanks so much. This has been really helpful.
This is great. Yeah. Glad I could join
Okay.
tonight.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.